Welcome, everyone. We are live with another episode of Level Up Law, where every Tuesday at noon, South Carolina Legal Services levels up your legal knowledge about an area of law that we practice in. I'm Senior Staff Attorney Susan Ingalls. I'm here with our producer, Kenneth Elliott of our excellent IT department. You are viewing Attorney Elliott tape from our office in Charleston, South Carolina. Today, Elliott will be discussing a recent case involving human trafficking here in South Carolina and the involvement of our law firm on behalf of a group of clients that was affected. January is National Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and so we are wrapping up our Level Up Law episodes for this month to bring you this special episode, which I think you'll find very interesting. Every year since 2010, this month, January, has been dedicated to raising awareness about human trafficking and to educate the public about how to identify and prevent the crime. Now, of course, we don't handle criminal cases, but we do handle cases that, as happened here, may end up on the criminal side of the law. So, but before we get started with Elliott's presentation, we do want you to know, as always, there's not any legal advice involved here. It's just general information for you. And if you do need the help of a lawyer on this or any other topic that we handle, please do call our intake line here at South Carolina Legal Services or apply online. All that information will be provided for you in the description below. Also, as a reminder, all of our episodes are posted by producer Kenneth Elliott to the Level Up Law playlist on our YouTube channel, usually very quickly within 24 hours. Now, it may be that you have some questions. Feel free to put those in the question box, but since this is a presentation about a particular case, we don't really anticipate that. But we will also link down below to the indictment that Elliott will mention in the case today. Now, be sure to check out our social media, like and subscribe, and get all the up-to-date information that we provide on Level Up Law and other resources. That information will be provided in the description below as well. So let's get started. Elliott, take it away.
Thanks, Susie. So I'm going to talk about a really cool case that's happened recently in federal court, and our clients are involved in it. They are victims of human trafficking, and as such, they are the main witnesses in this Department of Justice indictment of two farmers in South Carolina who were charged with human trafficking. So again, it's Human Trafficking Awareness Month. It just happens to coincide with this indictment as well. And what I wanted to do today is discuss what human trafficking is, what it looks like, how it kind of masquerades itself by using our client's case, the one that resulted in this indictment, as a case study. I think it's more interesting. It'll stick a little bit better. Unfortunately, my paralegal, Dulce Lopez, who has been working this case forwards and backwards for months now, who knows this case much, much better than I do, is out of the office today. So I, with my experience with the case, I'm going to try and step in and fill in the details as I can. But unfortunately, I think some details will be lost just because this involves about 8 or 9 young men and some pretty horrible circumstances that happened while they were working here in South Carolina. So before we get into what exactly human trafficking is, I wanted to go through some myths, and I get these from the Polaris Project. And here's some common human trafficking myths. Human trafficking is always or usually a violent crime. That's a myth. All human trafficking involves sex. That's a myth. Traffickers target victims they don't know. Also a myth. Only undocumented foreign nationals get trafficked in the US. That's a myth. Only women and girls can be victims and survivors of sex trafficking. A myth. Human trafficking only happens in illegal or underground industries. That's a myth, and we're going to talk about that today with our case study. Human trafficking involves moving, traveling, or transporting a person across state or national borders. Not necessarily true. If the trafficked person consented to be in their initial situation, then it cannot be human trafficking or against their will because they, quote unquote, knew better. That is a myth. And we're going to talk about that one in our case study. And finally, people being trafficked are physically unable to leave their situations, locked in, held against their will. So we're going to talk about that one because not all human traffickers use handcuffs and bars and steel and locks. So let's talk about just the federal law definition of trafficking. And more specifically, we're going to talk about labor trafficking. Now, most people think about trafficking as sex trafficking. And when most people hear human trafficking, they think women and girls being transported from a foreign country for the purpose of being sold into bondage for sex. Now, that's a huge problem. That's a real thing. There's also a huge amount of human trafficking that happens related to labor. And labor trafficking is the case that we have to talk about today. The federal definition of labor trafficking is this. It's when someone recruits, harbors, transports, provides, or obtains a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. So the way that I typically think about it and describe it to people is it's the bait and switch. It's the bait and switch. So you induce people to travel to your business, and then you change the terms of that agreement and force them to stay and work for you. So with that as kind of background and a basis for today, let's look at our case. So around 10 young men were hired in Mexico to come and work on a farm in South Carolina. As part of the deal, they'd get a special H-2 visa, which would allow them to come in the country legally and work here legally. The H-2A, H-2B program is a program where essentially a farmer or someone, an employer, has to prove that there's no viable US citizen candidates, and therefore they have to go outside the country and bring folks in. So it's very, very common for growers, for farmers. And so that's what they got as part of this deal. They were promised around $12 an hour for their work. Their travel expenses would be paid, living expenses paid, that sort of thing. Before they hop on the plane, they're told by the growers, hey, yeah, we're going to pay for your tickets, like we said, but then we're going to be reimbursed for them. So you're actually going to owe us a debt. You're going to enter the country owing us, $500. Maybe even more than that. I forget how much it was. And we're gonna be reimbursed from that out of your check. So these young men get to South Carolina from Mexico, and they arrive at the farm, and immediately their passports are taken. They move into their living quarters, and there's a total of about 35 men. I think they're all men. 35 people living in a pretty big farmhouse, but 35 people. Only 6 showers work. People are living about 6 to a room. I can remember one of the clients who was giving an interview to the Department of Labor said that the bugs were terrible And not just roaches, because we expect roaches in South Carolina, as terrible as that is. But he mentioned centipedes crawling on people, which is pretty terrible. When they got their first couple checks, they discovered that they were being paid closer to about $10 an hour. And when they addressed the issue with the farmers, they were told that, hey, there was no guarantee as to how much you were going to make, and that you should just be happy for what you're getting right now. Some days, randomly, the grower would change their rate of pay to a per piece. So instead of an hourly rate, they'd say, you know, we're going to pay you per piece of corn or per bushel of corn that you pick. And it's a clever way to screw people out of money, because they were making even less than that $10 rate at that point. Workers were forced to work for 10 to 12 hours a day, well into the night. They were not paid any overtime ever. They were told they couldn't leave. They were warned that bad things would happen if they left. The growers always carried guns. They were strapped. They would show those guns openly. They were never pointed at anyone. They were never fired, but they were very prominently displayed. The workers only had a few hours on Sunday to either wash clothes or go to the grocery store. I was talking to Dulce about this, and I was like, wait, what? Yeah, they could go to the grocery store and buy their own food, or they could wash their clothes that they were working in for 6 days at 10 to 12 hours a day. And most of them decided they were going to wash their clothes. That was the only time that they were allowed to leave, that they were given blessing to and given transportation to, because this is a farm in the middle of nowhere. So that's part of the isolation here. The meals provided to them were laughable and sad. They were just severely inadequate. Rice and beans and eggs, basically. No greens, no vegetables, and they were charged a lot of money for that food. They were docked pay for meals, which is allowed, but the meals provided were, again, just inadequate and expensive. And they really had no other option, because they couldn't really buy their own food and cook their own food. There's no time. Folks were getting sick drinking the water there, and they found out that it was contaminated. And when they addressed this with the grower said, yeah, you're gonna have to provide your own drinking water. A lot of them got really sick, and they were told they had to keep working. And if they didn't want to work, then they'd have to leave. And if they left, it wasn't going to be good for them, and it wasn't going to be good for their families back in Mexico. That's actually what caused a couple of folks to run away for the first time. The folks that ran away, those are not our clients, but those are the folks that kind of started the avalanche. And people started being like, oh, wait, we can go? Like, what happened to them? Are they safe? Are they good? In response, the farmers, the growers reminded these folks, bad things are going to happen if you run away. They reminded these folks about their connections in Mexico, so that our clients would think about the possible ramifications on their families that they're supporting. They had to work in terrible weather, like not monsoon. We don't get monsoons in South Carolina, but just like terrible downpour, tornado warnings. Keep working, keep working. And it's after that I guess the principal client, the first client, ran away. And he found his way to South Carolina Legal Services, and he was aware of his rights, mostly because at the consulate or embassy that he worked with in Mexico to come here under the H-2 visa, had some literature about his rights. So he'd read that, he was aware of his rights, he knew that his rights were being violated, and he knew he needed a lawyer. So he came to us, and we helped him by filing a complaint with the Department of Labor. Now, we do that typically because that's a way that we can get that client a special visa called a T visa. It's a visa that's specifically for victims of human trafficking. And the best way to prove that you're a victim of labor trafficking is to file a complaint with the Department of Labor. They then corroborate that, and then they can sign a certification. So that's the main reason why we would do that. And that's the kind of case that we take. We take those immigration cases. But because the Department of Labor is it's a federal agency, they forwarded that on to the Department of Justice. And because of how well things were going, how protected our guy was, because the Department of Labor signed that certification, which is one step closer to this client getting a special T visa, and because he was being supported by local organizations, agencies, that sort of thing, his buddies just started coming out of the woodwork. So we got about 8 more clients from this situation who came forward to corroborate this guy's story and to say, hey, we are also victims of this human trafficking. So that obviously bolstered this case, and it made its way to a federal prosecutor's desk who's got experience in human trafficking, and the indictment was very quickly filed. The 8 friends, coworkers came forward like right around the Christmas holiday, and this indictment happened like 3 weeks later. So they didn't waste any time. It's super impressive for such a big, behemoth system as the federal system. So it was really impressive. And hats off to those guys. So let's look, using those facts, let's look back at the definition for labor trafficking and just kind of pinpoint what in these circumstances amounted to human trafficking. So again, the federal law definition of labor trafficking is when someone recruits, harbors, transports, provides, or obtains a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. So a couple of obvious ones, I think, here. So they were recruited and transported based on the representation, the contract between the grower and these young men that they were going to earn $12 an hour. They made significantly less, and they made significantly less because these growers were not complying with federal regulations about overtime. So you have to get minimum wage, and then you get time and a half over 40 hours. So again, the bait and switch, right? You come, we'll pay you this. They get here, and all of a sudden, those aren't the terms. Forced or coerced to stay and accept substandard wages and living conditions, right? I mean, so how are they forced or coerced to stay? Now, these folks, human traffickers and the growers in this case, they're very subtle, they're very smart, they're very savvy, right? You don't get to the farm and the growers are there saying, hey, welcome from Mexico. So you've been human trafficked. So Henry's gonna put some handcuffs on you. We're gonna walk you over to the field. Henry's gonna uncuff you, and then he's gonna stand with a whip. And if you don't want to work, then he's gonna whip you. Then we're gonna put you back in handcuffs, and we're gonna put you over back in your cell. And you can't have any contact with anyone. So thanks for being trafficked, right? That's not how it goes. It's very subtle. There are comments here and there, and some important facts here that show that they were coerced into staying is, one, you take their passport and you say it's for safekeeping. and you don't give it back when someone asks for it. There was one person who asked for it back, and they said, yeah, no. And then everyone else was like, well, we're not going to ask for our passport back. We're just going to keep working, and then we hope that they give it to us at the end of this, right? So that's one way. This debt bondage is another important thing. So holding this transportation debt over their head and reminding them about it and saying, you got to keep working. You got to keep working because you haven't paid off your debt yet. That's a very common way that clever growers will keep people in bondage. You do some subtle threats, right? Subtle threats about you're not going to like it if you leave, or don't forget we got connections in Mexico if you want to complain about us or if you want to leave. That's pretty scary. That's a form of coercion to keep people there in involuntary servitude, right? That's force coercion, right? That's for sure hits that definition. I think I hit those three main folks. So that is the basics of human trafficking. That is how legal services got to be involved in what looks to be a very important, impactful case in South Carolina. You know, because human trafficking happens, especially labor trafficking happens in communities who are marginalized, who many of them are foreigners, many of them don't speak English, and many of them get into these positions where they have no other option than to just keep their mouth shut, keep their head down, keep working, hopefully get paid, and then go home and just live another day. And that's completely understandable. And a lot of them just don't know their rights. They don't know that people like legal services are around to support them and help them in getting the services that they need, in getting a special visa to stay here and continue working and to reach a place of freedom. But thankfully, these folks, they did. And it's amazing to work so many of these cases over the years and then to finally see the fruits of your labor by this federal indictment coming forward. And I imagine that thing got passed around the grower community, the farmers who do this work all the time. And if they think some attorneys, some savvy, smart attorneys in the U.S. Attorney's Office have the eyes to develop a case like this and file a case like this against two growers, well, they're probably looking for other cases. So they might need to tighten up and clean up, hopefully, which hopefully results in less of this, less human trafficking. So this is that's what we want to talk about today. Susie, any questions from the folks that are attending?
No, Elliot, I do not see any questions at this time. So we'll just invite anybody to, now that they've heard about this case, if you do have a question, you can certainly go ahead and put it in the question box now. Let me just double check that there's nothing anywhere else. Sometimes people will put that in the chat box instead of the question box, but yeah, it looks like that's all clear. So yeah, I think you know, I had a bit of a question. You know, are there other ways that we get these type of cases referred to us? For example, is there, you know, any way that our listeners or viewers could, you know, think about, hey, I know about something like this, whether it be whatever kind of human trafficking it is. What are some of the ways that we reach out to people who may be in this situation, and how can people refer those folks to us themselves?
That's a great question. So yeah, so a two-part answer. One is we have a unit, a migrant unit, and Dulce Lopez, who I mentioned, her title is outreach paralegal. So she goes and she's doing outreach. So she connects with community partners. So a lot of migrant farm workers, especially, that's the target area for our group. They have a lot of services that go out and meet those folks. If they bring their kids, there's migrant ed programs. There's folks that provide health care, just basic services for that community. And those folks are in tune with what to look for, and they have their ears to the ground. And a lot of referrals come from those folks. And a lot of times Dulce and the team will follow up directly. They'll go to migrant farm camps and do a, hey, here are your rights, or they'll meet them at the local Walmart or laundromat during that 2-hour window and say, hey, look, here are your rights. Let us know if you got any questions, and they then might seek our help. So those are the two main ways, is just doing direct outreach and then partnering with our community partners. If someone is aware or has questions about maybe folks being trafficked, certainly contact legal services. You can also just contact the Department of Labor. They will send out an investigator and take a look at it. Now, will they give it more credence if it comes from a client who's got a lawyer who knows how to package the evidence and testimony? Yeah, that's more effective. But I've been very heartened to see that the Department of Labor has taken this very seriously and has taken action to rectify this and to support our clients. They're connecting them with resources, because these folks left their job. They have no other income, right? So how are they going to, and the terms of their visa are now expired. So how do they stay in the country? How do they work? How do they support themselves, right? So that's what the Department of Labor and other folks, the Department of Employment and Workforce in South Carolina, are helping to support them. So a direct call complaint to them is one way to do it too.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful information for those who are watching or who may watch later on. And just to remind our viewers that we will link to our online intake and the information for obviously telephone intake as well, so that they'll have that information to just contact us directly to apply for our services. So great work, and I want to thank you, Elliot Tate, for really a great presentation on a particular case that was worked on so hard here at Legal Services. We really are so proud of what we do here at South Carolina Legal Services, and you can look forward to more case studies like this on Level Up Law in 2022. I think it's really helpful to talk about how we apply the law that we are making people aware of, how we apply it in an actual case. So we'll have more of that this year, so stay tuned. And thanks to our audience. We'll always want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate that. And but also, besides tuning in live, if you found this helpful yourself, or it will be helpful to others, we really do ask that you go to our YouTube channel tomorrow at South Carolina Legal Services and share this broadcast. I think it's a really great story about what we do here at Legal Services and how we can help folks that are out there. So definitely share it out. And while you are there, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can sign up for notifications so you'll know every time one of these episodes is posted. But also, you can always join us live. The information is posted on our calendar on our website at sclegal.org, as well as on our Facebook page. We really do want people, as many as possible to get this kind of important information. So be sure and do that. And also, be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Level Up Law on Tuesday at noon. And again, thank you, Elliot, for a great presentation. We really do appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. And that concludes today's webinar. Thanks, everybody.